Welcome to Movie Menu Classics, your go-to podcast for classic cinema. We're your hosts. I'm Heather.
I'm Vasthi. Each episode will be a spoiler-free discussion of our favorite classic films. We will be sharing why we recommend these films along with some fun facts, so join us as we revisit the classics we love. This episode we'll be discussing It Happened One Night and Roman Holiday.
So the first film is It Happened One Night. It's a movie that I recommended to Vasthi, and I absolutely adore this film. This was the first movie that went on my list. When I started thinking about a classic movie list to recommend, this was the first one because it is just such a charming, lovely film, and I just absolutely adore it. Let's talk about it. So It Happened One Night was released February 22nd, 1934. It was directed by Frank Capra. The screenplay was written by Robert Riskin, and it's based on the short story by Samuel Hopkins Adams. So here's the plot. A spoiled heiress running away from her father is helped by a man who's actually a reporter in need of a story. I guess this is the basic plot, but I'm not sure it's the best description of the heart of the film. But, you know, this is a generic plot that's put up online. That's fine. It stars Clark Gable and Claudette Colbert. You can stream this movie from Amazon, Vudu, YouTube, iTunes, and Google Play. There's different price ranges from like 99 cents to $3.99. I watched it on Amazon for $3.99. So Vasthi, what do you think?
It's one of those titles that I've known about just because I would love watching the American Film Institute specials that would air every now and then on like their top 100 or their top whatever. And this one was consistently on so many of the AFI films. I just never really had access to it, so I didn't really go out of my way to try to find it. So this was a fantastic opportunity to finally watch it. I paid $3.99 for it, which no big deal. Totally worth the rental. I was so pleasantly surprised by this film, and it completely makes sense to me why it's on so many top lists. I normally don't gravitate towards Clark Gable. I didn't really get his appeal as Swagger and Gone with the Wind and a couple of other films, but I thought he was so handsome and so charming in this film. I loved Claudette. She was the right amount of spoiled, but I didn't hate her. I was just wanting to see where this went. I thought their chemistry was fantastic. They were just very likable together, which I wasn't quite expecting. I don't know what I was expecting, really. I was kind of ready to say, like, oh, it's a little overrated. No, I loved it. I love the adventure, the road trip. I have a fear of flying, so I'm always open to a road trip anyway. If I could drive there, I'd rather do that than fly if I have the time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just enough hijinks with like the long bus ride, the hitchhiking, the car ride. There was enough of the travel adventure in this that segments of it reminded me of a lot of things I've already seen. So I realized this is such an influential film, whether it's rom-com or even something like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, where it's about like getting there and forming a relationship with the person you're traveling with, who you otherwise would probably never travel with in another circumstance. So I really loved their chemistry. My favorite scene was their fight at the hotel. I laughed out loud. I loved it.
The fight that they improvised
yes.
to get to throw off the detectives that are trying to find her.
Yes, I loved it. I thought it was such a clever story, and I actually didn't realize that Frank Capra did this until reading some of the notes. And as I talked to you before, it's like, oh, I already like other Frank Capra films. I'm like, okay, I have a type. I need to discover more of his work aside from sticking to the ones that I already love anyway, like this one. And I was really surprised to find out that this is only one of 3 films that has won like the top 5 the big Academy Awards. So like it won Best Picture, Director, Actress, Actor, and Screenplay, adapted screenplay. And the only other
Yeah.
films that have done that is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Silence of the Lambs. So like for something that was filmed so long ago, it still holds up. It's still, I think it deserves every single one of those awards, and I would absolutely recommend it. So
Awesome.
I'm actually really dying to hear your perspective because I want to know from like a person who has seen it a million times, like what is it that what drew you? What how did you first come across it? Because it's not a very accessible film back in the day.
Yeah, so again, this is one of those movies that like my dad loved, and it
Mm-hmm.
was you know, Turner Classic Movies was always on at our
Mm-hmm.
house, and this was just a film that I grew up watching, and I loved it from the time, as long as I can remember. I've loved
Mm-hmm.
this film. It's just, it's said to be like the grandfather of screwball comedies, and I definitely think it's the grandfather of the modern day romantic comedy,
Mm-hmm.
because it's putting two characters together who, like you said, like they wouldn't normally be together. They don't like each other. They drive each other crazy, but then of course they end up falling in love. Like, spoiler, sorry, but obviously it's a romantic comedy. We understand the idea, right? And like you said, they're forced to be on this journey together, and they each have completely different motivations, and it's the story is written so well. It like you said, it holds up. So I mean, at the time, this came out in 1934, so people are completely exhausted and tired, and the depression, like the
Mm-hmm.
depression has just worn everybody down, and this film was just needed. So it, like you said, it won in all 5 top major categories: picture, actor, actress, director, screenplay. It was the first film to do that, because 1934, right?
Mm-hmm.
um, it was also the first comedy to win Best Picture ever. That had
All
never
right, yeah,
happened
yeah,
before. And it's still very rare for a comedy to win Best
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Picture. But this film was just so needed at the time, and it still holds up because it's still so relatable, and you're correct, the characters are so charming. Like, Clark Gable is kind of a jerk, really. Like, he's that, like,
And I hate to say it, but he's the right amount of handsome to pull it off.
yeah, yeah. I
And
mean,
like
it's
I do have to remind myself this was at a time because there were some scenes where you're just kind of like, oh, whoa.
Yeah, there's definitely some moments that are very telling of the time period
Mm-hmm.
where women were lesser than, and like he makes a comment at the time, like, she deserves a beating every day, or
Yeah.
like that kind of thing. Like, it's definitely outdated, so there
Mm-hmm.
are those things, but again, this is filmed in the 30s,
Yeah.
so it's very different. But besides that, you still really relate to these people. You're still very attracted to these people, and you're correct, the chemistry is just fantastic. So it's just a fun ride to go
Mm-hmm.
on, and it doesn't matter how many times you watch it. And I thank you for your perspective of coming into it from today's time period and never having seen it, and it still does. It's not just me that's already in love with this film
Right.
that thinks it still holds up.
Well, like you just
So
recognize so many elements in the film and like a million other films that you've already seen.
yeah, it's been
Uh,
parodied 100 times, right?
mm-hmm.
Like, you can see the basis of every romantic comedy in this movie. Like, it's even, I mean, I'm watching Roman Holiday, and I was like, obviously
Oh,
influenced
yeah.
dramatically by this film, which is just, it was so cool. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't know, and we didn't know. We recommended 2 movies to each other that neither of us had seen the other one, and how perfect were these 2 films together.
It was a perfect, they were complemented each other perfectly, and it wasn't like there is enough individuality where they're their own films, but there was a lot of influence without being like, oh, that's a ripoff or oh, it's a remake.
Yes.
um I thought, yeah, so the as I was watching it happen one night, I thought, oh my god, because I've watched Roman Holiday countless of times, and it was exciting. It was just fun to be like, oh, the newsroom scene, or the inner conflict of what is he gonna do.
Yeah, it was definitely fun to see all the things. Even pajamas really got me, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if you've seen the movies, you'll understand that reference. But I was like, oh, pajamas,
Yeah.
because I don't think either of those girls were used to wearing men's pajamas, and they both did. So adorable.
I mean, I was pajamas a thing of a fashion thing at the time? Did women just wear
I
nightgowns or,
yeah, I feel like women just wore nightgowns, and like in Roman Holiday, Audrey Hepburn mentions like, some people I hear
hmm
sleep in nothing, and that's like scandalous. It was very, there was a lot of what is proper and what is
hmm
um I can't think of the word, uh acceptable, something along those lines of what women could wear and what they couldn't.
And also it's about both films deal with like the classicism. So in Clark Gable's case, what struck out to me was kind of his disdain for the elite, the rich elite, which is a theme that I recognize in another Frank Capra film. Um, it's I found it interesting because I understood kind of where he was coming from. He didn't have to help her out where he did. So they kind of weren't really forced. He kind of was trying to be the decent guy, but also he had an interest, or there was something in it for him too. One thing the only thing, and this is just strictly coming from like a modern perspective, is her makeup was really distracting for me, only because I'm like, there's no way that would last more than a day. Or my
Right.
makeup would have. That was just something I'm like, I mean, everyone wore such heavy makeup in the 30s, the 20s, 30s, 40s. It was just a funny little detail. I'm like, dang, I want to know what brand she was wearing that could last that amount of
Yeah, absolutely.
time.
I mean, but again, they didn't follow the realism of how like
Right.
dirty and grungy, like their
Yeah.
clothes were looking wonderful the whole time, and
And that's
yeah,
the other thing.
it's
She wasn't acting spoiled. So I feel like the IMDb description was wrong because she really went with the flow with
but
so much of
I
it.
think the spoiledness comes from her not understanding how the world works for people who don't have money. Or having to budget or having
Yeah,
to be
that's true.
uncomfortable.
Yeah.
She was not used to being uncomfortable. She's not used to having to rough it at all or go hungry at all, or not just have what she like instant gratification.
Right, but I think that's why it struck me that she wasn't acting the way I expected her. So like the food that was in front of her, she's like, I'm hungry, I'll eat it. Even with like the carrot scene, she eventually came around, but it didn't come across as overly annoying where you're just like, oh my god, I don't want to watch this anymore. She was the right amount of the two elements she was trying to capture of someone of that status, that elite status. So that surprised me wonderfully, and I love that she won Best Actress because it didn't come off as like a spoiled or rotten person that was like dealing with. To me, she had like a generally good attitude with a little bit of resistance. That was my impression of her. I mean, except for the opening scene with her dad, but I
Yeah.
liked her interpretation of the role for
Yeah, I
sure.
think she did it. I agree. She did a fantastic job. He did a fantastic job. It was just such a great film overall. It's just really charming. I highly
Yeah.
recommend it, obviously. Okay, so some fun things to know about this movie is that Clark Gable did not want to make this movie. Okay? Did not.
Ah!
He's under contract with MGM at the time,
hmm
and he gets in trouble with the studio because he complains to the press that his weekly salary is too small. So as a punishment, they loan him to this like lowly studio, Columbia
hmm
Pictures, and this is a punishment for him, and he's like forced to make this film. Okay, and Clark Gable did something like in his 37-year career, there was, I think, more than 60 roles that he
hmm
played. This is his one and only Academy Award.
Oscar.
The only one. He was nominated 3 times. This is the only one he won for. And nobody thought this movie was going to go anywhere. It was just
hmm
supposed to be this like come and go little trifle, this, fairly low budget, just, whatever film. And
I
Claudette
read.
Colbert actually I'm sorry, give me 1 second. Claudette Colbert said after this was filmed, she said, quote, "I just made the worst clinker of my career." I'm sorry, what were you gonna say? I didn't mean to cut you
I
off.
read that they weren't even the first choices for these roles.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I just know about that he was forced to do it. He didn't want to.
Yeah, I should have written it, but I did come across that they weren't the first choices. That they were, I think, either second or third. But I read that. I'm like, well, I'm glad it worked out the way it did, because I don't know who else at the time would have really connected in that way. I just thought their chemistry was so good, and I get it now.
It was fantastic. I can't imagine who else could do it either. That's interesting. I'll have to look that up. Okay, so during the Academy Awards, and this is a testament to how much Claudette did not think this film was going to go anywhere. So during the ceremony, she's actually on the other side of town at Union Station waiting for a train to go to New York. And a member of the Academy's press committee finds her and convinces her to go to the Biltmore Hotel to pick up her award. So she arrives there out of breath, gets her trophy from Shirley Temple, of all people, makes a quick little statement about how she can't really talk because she's probably going to cry, and she thanks Frank Capra because she wouldn't be here without him. And then she takes a couple of press photos and she leaves. She was there for a grand total of 6 minutes.
And probably wasn't dressed up for a ceremony of any kind, or
right. She's just waiting for a train. Okay.
In her travel clothes. Yeah. Well, I think it's very fitting for the film she won for. So
That's very true.
Just you go with the flow. You're dressed not appropriately for the journey that you're having. I think I like it even more. I think that adds to the story of the film in itself.
And what's his name? The guy who wrote the screenplay, Robert Riskin. So he wasn't at the ceremony either. Mm-hmm. Supposedly, he was on a date with soon to be Clark Gable's wife. Like, they weren't dating at the time, but it ended up they get married. I forget her name. But supposedly he was on a date instead of being at the award ceremony, and the woman ends up being Clark Gable's wife, which is hilarious.
That's funny.
Oh, so I mean, this sweeps the Oscars, right? And then the party that Frank Capra throws after this is apparently so wild and rambunctious. There's a drunken brawl between two men, and one of them actually falls into Capra's goldfish pond. And then Capra himself is so drunk that he wakes up in the morning on his lawn clutching his Oscar. Okay, so
that's a party. That's a Gatsby party right there.
Exactly. Crazy party. Also and so the year before, he was up for Best Director, and whoever was announcing the award, like, and the Oscar goes to, and he says, "Come get it, Frank." But there was two Franks, Frank Capra and another Frank. So he actually is halfway up to the stage before he finds out that it's not him, it's the other Frank.
Oh God.
So this year, the Academy Awards in 35, like, the announcer again says, "Come get it, Frank," as a play on last year. And he actually like stays seated until he's like assured that it's for him. They're talking about him.
Yeah, I want to see the envelope.
So he was, from embarrassment the year before to actually winning. That's pretty funny. A little legend that happened. Also, I didn't know the scene on the bus where the passengers are singing "The Man on the Flying Trapeze." That was improvised, apparently, and it was an idea that Frank Capra kind of had at the last minute. And Claudette Colbert actually argued with him that this is ridiculous, and like, not everybody knows the words to that song, and this isn't gonna work. And he's like, "It's fine. We can always cut it out. It's not gonna affect the plot," because it's totally unrelated to the
scene.
Yeah, it turns out to be one of the most charming scenes in the film. It's super fun. It's super memorable. So he, has this idea at the last minute, and they improvise it, and it's such a charming moment. It's so much fun. I love that.
Yeah.
And then the last bit of trivia I had is that in 1996, Clark Gable's one Academy Award went up to auction, and Steven Spielberg bought it for $607,000 and donated it back to the Academy.
I love it. Cool. I love that. Yeah, it's such a perfect film in the spectrum of film history. And I just have a new appreciation for Clark Gable because I really didn't like him before for no real reason other than I was like,
But you love Gone with the Wind, right?
I really do, but I don't know. There are films that I like where sometimes I just don't understand the super appeal of the lead actor or actress, but the story's so good that I'll just kind of I'll deal with. No, not deal with. It's the wrong word. I'd say like I can still appreciate a film even though I don't really like the actor or actress portraying the roles. But in this, so that was Gone with the Wind for me. Like I liked it for the story, not necessarily because of him. And this was just such a contrast to that. And I believe you warned me, or you didn't. It's not a warning. You said I think you're gonna like him in this, and you were 100% right. I have a brand new appreciation for Clark Gable after this.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what you think about watching Gone with the Wind again. Now that you have a new perspective on Clark Gable, maybe you find him more charming. But I read somewhere that there was a biography of Frank Capra's, and Frank Capra said that it happened one night was the only film where Clark Gable actually got to play just himself, like a fun-loving, charismatic, genuine guy.
Yeah.
So maybe
Well,
that's why this is something he was more comfortable with. He was so charming in this movie. And I actually haven't seen a ton of Clark Gable films, only 3 maybe.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, I was just it's also testament to his acting where someone who I thought I didn't like just transformed this role into like, oh my god, number one, he's so handsome, and two, like he's funny. So maybe it's the humor side of it that I just really gravitated to, and I'm interested in looking at other films on his filmography.
Yeah, I actually like to see some more too. So apparently it was Carol Lombard that
Oh yeah. That's a name I've seen.
ended up being his wife. Yeah.
Okay.
So what do you feel about? Have you heard about the controversy of HBO Max removing Gone with the Wind?
Yes, I will say I made the classic mistake of just reading the headline and being like, ugh, what are people doing? So I get what I feel like HBO Max should have just done it kind of quietly rather than announce it. Like I do have to rewatch the film. I do remember the Civil War being the Confederacy being a little glorified in that, but I appreciate it for its grandeur. Like so much of the time, I remember having to think like, oh my god, this was 1939. It's so well done. Um, I don't. After reading more into it, I really don't have a problem. It's only temporary. They're gonna bring it back with like a warning for people to know who aren't really familiar with the context of the story.
Yeah.
I'm okay with the disclaimer. I just feel like it's a bit of an overreaction on people's parts if they didn't read the rest of the article. If they just went by the headline, I did. I was like, what? You can't erase history just because you don't agree with a work of art that was made at the time. But it's
Yeah,
only
I
temporary. After I read it, I'm like, okay, I chilled out, and I'm like, that was dumb of me. I should know better than to just go on something based on the headline.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I wasn't necessarily upset. I was just like, okay, I understand with everything that's going on in the political climate and the social movement that we're having, which is I understand they're trying to make a stand on that, but I completely agree with you that we can't censor or erase past works of art in the sense that it's in the cultural context of at the time. It's definitely a disclaimer is fine. Discussing it is what we need. We need to discuss it. Why why was this acceptable at the time? What has changed? Like, we need to actually have a discussion around it. So it's a wonderful film. You have to accept it for the cultural context at the time, but books and film, we need to keep them and discuss, watch them, read them, and then talk about it. I feel like that's so important.
Yes.
Because we can see where we've been and where we've come and what still needs to change. And I think even, Disney on Disney Plus has posted even a lot of their animated movies. So Lady and the Tramp, one of my favorite movies, it has a disclaimer that there are culturally insensitive things about this film, but it's being showed in its original format. And just be aware that there are culturally insensitive things.
I actually love the way Disney is handling the ones that they have released, because there are a couple of in the vault that they're gonna keep in the vault.
Yeah, you don't see like, what is it, like Song of the
Songs
South
of the
or
South.
whatever. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I completely agree, and I am looking forward to a rewatch, because when I first saw it, I saw it on the big screen at the Egyptian Theater, and it was spectacular. So I do want to revisit that one after watching him in It Happened One Night, just to see how my perspective of him has changed. So I'm going to take you up on that.
All right, awesome. So I think we pretty much covered It Happened One Night. I highly recommend it. Vasthi, I get the feel that you highly recommend it.
I recommend it just because it's on these AFI lists for a reason, and it's just gonna make so much. Even if you're not into romantic comedies, it's one that you should watch. It should be one that's in your repertoire. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, definitely.
No matter what genre you're really into, but it's so funny, and it's worth the effort to dig in to find it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay,
yeah,
so the next film, the next film was recommended by you, which is Roman Holiday. So why did you pick this film?
This film, I mean, at the risk of sounding dramatic, totally changed my life. I related to it in unexpected ways at the time. I saw it in college. I rented it from the library. I knew of it, Audrey Hepburn. At the time, I really enjoyed, Breakfast at Tiffany's, which now I actually don't like at all.
Interesting.
Oh yeah. Send your email. Come at me. I'm ready to defend myself.
I feel like this is like a whole other episode discussion. Okay. This can be a long one. All right, so you've changed your opinion about Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Well, I just think it's unfair that when you think of Audrey Hepburn, you think of her outfit in front of Tiffany's, when I think the film itself, I don't know, I just enjoy Roman Holiday so much more, and I'll get more into it as we discuss it. So this was released on September 2nd, 1953, directed by William Wyler, who also directed one of my other all-time favorite film, Ben-Hur. So which are two completely different styles of film, but there's something about those two films that have drawn me. And I'm like, oh, of course he did. I love them. The screenplay is by Ian McLane, Hunter, and John Dighton, and the story is by Dalton Trumbo. Here's the plot. A bored and sheltered princess escapes her guardians and falls in love with an American newsman in Rome. That's not how I would describe it. I would probably say restless, not bored. Bored makes me think of privileged, but you know it. Like spoiled. I think that's what I associate bored with. So
I think if anything, she's overwhelmed.
Yes, she's exhausted.
And she feels trapped in this life that she didn't get to choose, and she can't escape. And yeah, I agree. Bored's not a great word for that.
So this is starring Audrey Hepburn in her first lead film, along with Gregory Peck. You can stream this film from Pluto TV, YouTube, iTunes, Amazon Prime, Vudu, and iTunes for $2.99. I own this DVD, but I rewatched it on Amazon Prime for free, so it's it's out there if you want to watch it. Heather, what did you think about it?
I loved this movie within minutes. I mean, I don't know how I missed this movie. What? I don't know how I didn't ever watch this movie before. That blows my mind because within minutes I was like, I know what this movie is and I'm in love. I'm in, I'm done.
Give me more.
Like just the credits. I mean, the credits start rolling and it's, you know,
and the music is so joyful.
Yes, it's so fun. And there's just the style. But so the credits start rolling and it's like, this film was filmed entirely in Rome. And I'm like, that's really cool. And then, you know, I love Gregory Peck. I love Audrey Hepburn. Oh my gosh, are they so young and gorgeous in this film?
They're so good looking. I love it.
Audrey, so I'm a big Audrey Hepburn fan. From my first film that I love her is My Fair Lady.
Oh, yes.
So this is 11 years before My Fair Lady. She's only 24 in this film, and she is stunning. I mean, this woman was just stunningly gorgeous. And Gregory Peck is so handsome and charming. And he was pretty young in this too. I think he was 37.
Like in his mid-30s, yeah.
Yeah, 37. Yeah, 37. I wrote it down because I was gonna forget. It was 37. You know, and I love him from To Kill a Mockingbird, which is in 62, so it was some years later. But this movie is, again, definitely influenced by its grandfather. It Happened One Night, and it's a fun, another screwball romantic comedy, but it is just such a great ride. I mean, so it's a classic. We've seen this movie a million times in the sense that it's and I've seen princess movies even, like she escapes. She's just trying to get away for a couple hours just from the overwhelming pressure and just nonstop life that she is forced into. Like, she has this duty and this responsibility to her family and her country. I mean, and she's so elegant and graceful, and we watch her do her job, and then at the beginning you're watching her do her job, but you also see that she's just a girl. You know, the first thing you watch is her greeting people, and she's like struggling to keep her shoe on. And I was just in love. I mean, this movie is so well done and so gorgeous. So you instantly fall in love with her. And then, you know, she escapes and she runs into Gregory Peck, and the story unfolds, and it's, you know, an adventure, and watching her discover what it's like to live on the other side. And that's
discover
something
her confidence, her freedom.
Yeah, and she really grows from this moment, because she's been treated, you know, she's treated with such respect because she's royalty, but she's also treated like a child. She's told what to do, when to do it, how to do it. I mean, there's literally a script for every moment of her life, and they make that point in one of the very first scenes. Her handler, I don't know what else to call her, is going over the schedule, and it's she's literally reciting, okay, I'm gonna say thank you, no thank you, oh, this
have a break here,
yeah, it's her life is scheduled down to every minute and every word, and it's so suffocating.
Up to her snack,
the same snack every time, absolutely. So, and, you know, it's very much like It Happened One Night. He's in it. He's, again, a newspaper man, just like in It Happened One Night. And he's in this for the story.
I would say a lot more obvious than It Happened One Night. Like, he's just like, oh, this is worth 5 G's. I'm in. I felt like Clark Gables was a little more from a goodwill torn. I feel like he was torn a little earlier than Gregory Peck was. Or Gregory Peck.
Gregory Peck was definitely in it for the money. The whole 90% of the film, he was in it for the money. And you're right. Clark Gable's character he was just like forced out of basic human decency,
right,
to like help this spoiled brat, as he put it, because she didn't know how to like function on her own. Right. He's like, you're doing a real great job, like.
Well, it does, and I guess in bringing that point up, so does Gregory Peck. Like, he could have easily left her on the street sleeping when she passes out, like, but he kind of mistreats her like an inconvenience, like, oh, here's another, you know, drunk girl on the street, fine, you know, and he just kind of like mistreats her a little bit, and I love that that is brought back in to when she realizes, like, he was so mean to me. He's like, oh crap, what have I done?
But she
I
also says he was so mean to me, and I loved it
It was
because
so wonderful.
yeah.
So that, and based on that, like, I think that's where I related so much, which was so unexpected when I first watched this, because I grew up very sheltered. I grew up just not allowed to do anything. And even though I came from a complete opposite background from royalty, but having to ask for permission for every little thing and just not being allowed to do anything and go hang out with my friends, it was a really lonely way to get through my youth. And so when I first watched this, I kind of broke away from my family's wishes. They didn't want me to go away to college. They wanted me to stay at home, go to the local school. They just didn't want to let me go. And so I just left. And her journey, it just spoke to me so much, because I still had dreams of traveling and just having experiences that I felt I missed out on as a teenager. I, you know, so in that sense, even just like a day away was just, I'm like, I get it. I forgot that she was a princess. I just saw her as a female who wants to experience, who wants to have adventure, gain confidence. How do you gain confidence without having experience? And it just completely changed my perspective at a young age. And I still go back to this movie whenever I want to feel that again. When, sometimes life gets you down a little bit and you just want to feel happy, and you just want to, like, that fire's still in there, wanting to discover more, what else is out there. And I adore this film in spite of it being a princess film, which on paper, I'm like, I'm never going to like this movie. I adore it. It changed it influenced me so much. Especially in terms of like going abroad, not listening to the people who, they were trying to do their best. The people who were dealing with Princess Anne's schedule, it's for her own interest, but it's the way they only knew how. And so she knew she just needed to get away. But it's for her own personal growth. It wasn't because she hates everybody or she hates the establishment necessarily. Although, some things do get discovered as she grows on her journey later on. But I mean, that's what I took from this film. It's a story about growth, about independence, about female independence and confidence. And it's something that we all need to continue to grow. We never stop growing. And that's what keeps me so in love with this film. At the end of the day, it's more than a love story.
Yeah, it's a beautiful movie, and I don't want to spoil the ending, but I would say that the ending is unique. It's not a classic ending. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting. But it was oddly satisfying for me. Like, as it was happening, I wasn't sure I would be satisfied, but then it just, to have all of the characters be in that moment, and you're seeing them all, it's just, there's silent moments of them just looking at each other, the three main characters.
Oh, and that's so amazing.
and you're just, you can feel and understand and relate to exactly what they're going through in that moment. And it's beautifully done, it's beautifully acted, and it was very rewarding, because in that moment you can see the growth of the characters and the appreciation of the characters. And it wasn't what I expected, but I was very happy with it. And
Yay! That makes me so happy. And again, a lot of people who, especially in college, when I was like, you have to watch this film, it's my new favorite film. Most of my friends did not like the film, whether just they weren't really into like classic films, or there's classic tropes that, there's a formula that a chunk of the population wants to happen. Um, so I was approached with a lot of pushback, like, why would you make me watch this? But that was from an early 20s perspective. Where now the older I get and the more I watch the film, it stands out that this is more than a love story. It's just a story about personal growth
Yes,
on every
absolutely.
side. Whether it is Joe Bradley or Princess Anne, I could watch this a million more times and be completely still keep finding new things to gush about. I had the privilege actually a couple years ago to watch this on Valentine's Day on a big screen in downtown LA. And one thing that as many times as I've seen this film, I wasn't expecting to feed off of the audience laughter. Like, this film is actually really funny, not so much in a very obvious way, the way It Happened One Night is. I was laughing out loud at that one by myself, but then being around an audience with Roman Holiday, there were just certain beats that I wasn't necessarily laughing out loud by myself, but with an audience is just like, oh, this makes it even better to see it with an audience. And noticing little details just because it's formatted in a different way. My favorite memory from that big screen showing was I've seen a lot of classic films where the main character comes up and there's applause from enthusiastic fans that are in the audience. When Gregory Peck comes on screen for the first time during that poker game, there's just this collective gasp of everyone just being taken from his handsomeness. And it was so funny because it was just all you heard was
I get that moment.
it was.
And I kind of had that moment too, because again, like, the last film I saw Gregory Peck in,
Yeah.
this is the youngest I've ever seen him on film. To Kill a Mockingbird he was much older. And I was like, oh my, like, whoo.
Well,
Because
I
I
know
always kind of looked at him
yeah.
as older and like fatherly.
Oh,
And this was the first time
Yeah.
I've ever seen him as like a heartthrob, and I was like,
I
my.
didn't. You know what? I didn't even think about that because you're right. I did see To Kill a Mockingbird in high school first, and I had seen clips of like The Omen, and yeah, he's just and some of like his World War II films. He was a little older.
Yeah, I mean, he did like war movies and westerns and all
Mm-hmm.
this stuff when he was much older. This is, yeah, I've never seen him in this light as the charming leading man, and I was taken aback.
So
It
I'm
was
gonna break the rules a little bit. I know we already did like an unofficial kind of side. I'm gonna watch Gone with the Wind. And that's not necessarily to discuss it, but just based on the prior performance we talked about. I'm gonna
uh-huh.
give you like if you want to see like very young Gregory Peck and even more handsome.
Oh,
And the
do
story is just spectacular. I believe it was a best picture Oscar winner is The Gentleman's Agreement. It's not very well known. I highly recommend it. It's still very topical, and he's even younger. I know I recommended it for the wrong reason, but um, it's a very topical film, and it's excellent. So if you want to just kind of like see that whenever you can, it's worth it.
Oh, I'm down, definitely. I saw that on his like well known for this film,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd never heard of it, but I'll definitely check it out. That sounds
Oh, I
awesome.
mean, I realize it. Yeah, I came from a shallow place, but the story itself is spectacular. It's a
I'm okay with that.
very yes. So
That's
back to
fine.
Roman Holiday.
So I have a question. So
Yes.
I was doing some research about Roman Holiday, and
Mm-hmm.
I like, oh, back to the credits, like, Dalton Trumbo comes up,
Right.
and so I'm looking more into this because this is after. If you don't know, by the way, in the audience, if you don't know who Dalton Trumbo is, he was one of the Hollywood 10 in 1947. These 10 filmmakers or people who are in the industry were called to speak in front of the House Un-American Committee, and they refused to testify, so they were convicted and
Blacklisted.
held in contempt of Congress. And then the Motion Picture Association of America blacklisted them from working in the industry. I haven't seen it, but I've heard great things about Trumbo, the movie. It came out a couple years ago, and it
Not
starred,
that long ago, yeah.
Bryan
Bryan Cranston.
Cranston.
Yeah.
So it's a movie that I've always wanted to watch because I know about Dalton Trumbo.
Yeah.
I didn't realize he wrote Roman Holiday because, again, this movie just slipped right under my radar completely. But so I'm looking it up, and it's something said that he wasn't given the Oscar, but it also, like, now everything lists him as the I'm really confused as to what actually happened at the time. Maybe you know.
So in just in a nutshell, his friend who was Ian McLane, Hunter, took the he wrote the movie right before he was going to be sent off to prison, I believe. And so he, when it was nominated, or right before it went into production, he gave the credit to one of his good friends who was Ian McLane, and so he ended up getting nominated and winning this Oscar for a film he didn't write. And funny enough, on my DVD, it still lists him as the writer. So this I must have bought that DVD before it was reprinted, before the Screen Actors Guild credited him again posthumously in 2011.
Yeah, and watching the film on Amazon Prime, it lists him. The reason I knew Trumbo wrote this is because it says written by Dalton Trumbo. So that's why I was so confused.
Yeah, so they reinstated the WGA officially reinstated the credit in 2011. And I believe I'm gonna have to, if anybody wants to fact check me on this, I believe he did receive credit for it on the DVD release in 2003. So before the WGA officially reinstated his credit. So yeah, there's a lot of confusion around that. I did see Trumbo when it came out. I'm a huge Bryan Cranston fan, so I was gonna see it anyway. I didn't know what it.
Me too.
Yes!
I absolutely love it. Like I have 2 guinea pigs, and they are named Walter and Jesse.
I love it. Oh, and I mean that's another podcast we could go off on.
Yes. Okay.
So yeah, I did watch Trumbo. I didn't know while watching the film when there's a scene where he's typing a script up and it says Princess Anne. I'm like, wait a minute, did he do that? And then sure enough, so I learned about that blind watching the film. It was just a pleasant surprise. I believe there's a documentary out there based on both Trumbo and the behind the scenes of Roman Holiday that I actually need to watch. But again, just there's so much content out there. It's forgivable if you don't watch everything related to some of your favorite films. But now that we're talking about it, I do want to go out of my way to watch it. So I actually do recommend Trumbo as a side, even though it just came out a couple years ago. I think it slipped through the cracks just because that was the year that the Oscar So White controversy was headlining and taking overshadowed the Oscars. So my first thought, I remember when I heard them, I'm like, but Bryan Cranston deserved it. It was a really good film. So yeah, fans of Roman Holiday should watch Trumbo, and I think it's an important film to watch, just what some of the writers went through at the time, whether you agree with the politics or not.
I was just going to say, I completely agree. Watching it just for the historical context of understanding what happened in that time, like, you know, trying to defeat communism, and then like the blacklisting of Hollywood and what it did to Hollywood. And it's something, my dad was definitely a movie buff, and he knew so much about everything. So he used to tell me about this is how I learned all about these things. Was the whole blacklist and everything that happened. So that's really fascinating. So he won for the screenplay, right?
Yes, for I guess at the time, because the Oscars the categories have evolved over time.
Yeah.
So I think at the time it was just known as best story, but I think in today's definition it would be the screenplay.
And what other awards did this film win?
So it was nominated for 10 Academy Awards, which is pretty incredible. Wow. It won 3. Best Actress, so Audrey Hepburn right out of the gate, her first lead, won the Academy Award for Best Actress. It won for best writing and it won for best costume design, which I'm assuming really, actually, you know more about the costume designer in this film. So,
Yes. Okay. So Edith Head is another person that my dad always pointed out when we'd
mm-hmm.
watch old movies. Oh, there's another Edith Head movie. So,
Yeah.
between 1949 and 1978, this woman won 8 Academy Awards for Best Costume Design out of 35 nominations.
That's incredible.
35. That is the 5th most nominations of all time of any person receiving nominations. And to top off that list, like the top is Walt Disney, who had 59 nominations, and
John Williams,
yeah. 48. Those are the top
so she's
two.
the most nominated woman then.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah.
And she's 5th on the list of all time. So this woman, I mean, and that's just the film she was nominated for.
Yeah,
I mean, her career was insane. So this woman was amazing. And the list is just so long. I was looking through her, and you know what else she won for? Best costume design is The Sting.
We're gonna talk about The Sting eventually on another episode.
Yes,
that's incredible. Course. I love it.
I thought you'd appreciate that.
Absolutely.
When again the credits started rolling and I was sold, like I was oh my gosh, Edith Head. Yeah. I was like, that's so cool. So I immediately paused it and looked it up. I was like, I need to write this down. What is actually the amazingness of this woman in numbers? Right. So I love it.
So I'll just bring up some fun facts about the film that I've just collected over the years, and some that I just recently learned about. So it's been long rumored that this film was based on Princess Margaret, who's Queen Elizabeth's younger sister. And I don't know if you watch The Crown at all on Netflix, but
no, it's on my list to watch. I really didn't, sure.
Because I'm not in Britain. I wasn't of the time. I wasn't really aware of how wild and independent and just kind of suffocated Princess Margaret actually came across. So to know that this film was like, there's I don't know if it's exactly confirmed, but there's enough speculation that this film was based on some of her hijinks in Italy or just around Europe, because she's very independent. She just happened to be this very spirited person, just born into the wrong family, and unfortunately it's a family that is all about duty and country. Another fun fact is Gregory Peck was he was the star at the time. Audrey Hepburn, she had, I think, a role on Broadway at the time, but she wasn't known in films yet. So this was going to be her first lead role. And after watching the screening, Gregory Peck's like, my name can't be the top billed name. It's not out of like being cavalier. It was out of not looking foolish, because he's like, this film is not about me. It's about her. She's gonna be a major star. Switch it up, because this isn't my movie.
I love that.
And that made me love him even more.
Yeah, I mean, it's true though. It's really her story, but I guess
her story.
It was very traditional to list the man first, and also he was the headlining name. That makes a lot of sense. But I'm really glad that he stood up for that. That's amazing.
For sure. One recent fun fact that I just learned recently was why it was shot in black and white. So I have realized that depending on budgets and story interpretation, why something like Gone with the Wind could be filmed in color in 1939, but then this is filmed in black and white in the 50s. So it wasn't because William Wyler was trying to give homage to any type of genre or anything. It's because he had to initially choose between filming on location or shooting it in color. Ideally, he didn't want to shoot it in color in Rome, but Paramount was like, no, choose one or the other. So that was a compromise. It's like, fine, I choose filming in Rome so I'll cut the corner on shooting it in black and white. And
I'm so glad he made that decision, because one, I can't imagine this film in color. I feel like it would almost be distracting. I love you so much, because we have the same brain apparently. That's awesome. But also, yeah, filming on location, just the fountains and the markets, and it made me. That's another thing this film did, is it reignited my fire to, oh my god, I want to visit Italy so badly. Not only is it where my grandfather is from,
Oh my
he
god.
was first generation Italy. I mean, or first generation Italy. He was first generation American, and my great grandparents still lived in Italy, and
Yeah.
I guess he was born here, but he had such a tie. All his family's in Italy. He was the first one here.
Right. Oh,
Because I
that's
really,
fascinating.
yeah, I want to go see where I'm from.
Yes.
Where it is, but it's just such a beautiful historic, like Rome, Venice, like these places. It just like you said about travel, it really like reignited that fire of wanting to go experience it. And it was just a stunning, like they couldn't have faked that.
No, it would have looked so bad. And I have, just a small tangent, I have seen a film where it was supposed to be on location and MGM just said no. And it was terrible. Personal opinion is Brigadoon. I
Oh
don't know if,
yes,
and
it's like it's so obviously a soundstage.
it's a little laughable because it's like maybe just don't even do it if like that's what you were going for, because they just didn't have the budget to go to the Scottish moors, and it just, that's a prime example of, you just, some things you just can't fake.
Yeah, Brigadoon's a great movie, but it looks like they filmed. It reminds me of An American in Paris. I don't know if you've seen it, but it looks like
That's
it looks
another
like it's
podcast
filmed on a
because
soundstage. Like we took a Broadway musical and stuck it on a soundstage and filmed it, and that's what this film is. So
well,
yeah,
I look
I
forward to the day
100%.
when we talk about American in Paris because I have thoughts, and I'm a huge George Gershwin fan.
Okay, I'm a huge
um,
Gene Kelly fan,
I
so
am too. So yeah,
we
no,
can
that's
talk
gonna
about it.
be another
All right.
episode. So actually, now that you say about their tourism in Rome, two things that came to mind, or that keep coming to mind as often as I watch this film. It really wasn't that long off after World War II. So having a film shot on location, I would assume is the tourist industry wanting to boom there and just kind of wanting to advertise like it's cool now. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
we're still here.
We're
Come
still
look at
here. They're
us.
beautiful. It's amazing. And I mean, and the reason I say is because they talk about the currency and like what the value of the lira is worth. And it's really jarring. I'm like, oh, that has to, it's not only just of the time, but living on a day on like $1.50, that has to be, post-war, um, a post-war economic fallout from the war. I could be wrong, but that's what came to mind. Um,
I'm not. I know that markets. I mean, and I'm not a history buff
mhm.
on this stuff, but just basics is that the value of the American dollar versus other countries has widely
Mhm.
fluctuated, and it still does. Like even just like the peso
Yeah, yeah,
versus
yeah.
here, or the euro, or whatever. I'm not even sure what money they use, but um,
Yeah, because even
it's
Joe Brett, the reason he wants to win this money to get out, I feel like he was covering a, he stayed from the war. I could be wrong, but like that's the backstory I have. He's someone who's stuck there who can't earn enough money to get out, and so
yeah, to
this is
fly.
his
He
tick.
wants to fly back home to New
Yeah,
York, right? That's what he says he wants the money for.
yeah.
Yeah, but so now even if we go back to things costing like $1 or something,
Mhm.
because she asked for money to borrow from
Mhm. And
him,
she's like,
and
a
which I
thousand.
wonder if she actually sends it back to him,
I
because
hope
they
so. I
never
hope
talk about
so.
that.
No.
That's left as a cliffhanger, just to point out. But anyway, so they, she basically borrows $1.50 from him, which is 1,000 lira, which sounds
Mhm.
like so much. And even she's like, "Can you afford to give that?" He's like,
Mhm.
"It's $1.50. It's fine."
Yeah. So
But if
actually,
you,
go ahead.
oh no, just wait. If you look back at It Happened One Night, so that
Mhm.
that takes place. They're traveling from Miami to New York, so obviously the U.S. in the 30s, but they're living off of $5 here and there.
Mhm.
A telegram was, he sent it collect for $2.60. Like things were money like inflation has changed so dramatically. Like it
Oh
was,
yeah, I understand that. It was just that's what because it happened, less than 10 years after the war. I feel like there was
mhm.
still some of the effects that I haven't quite confirmed, but that's what made me think of it. Is like I wonder if that's part of it. Like there has to be some of the fallout from the war why he can't leave.
Yeah, why he
Um
can't afford to get out. And it's
and I mean,
interesting the vast difference between the lira and the US dollar at the time,
mhm.
that it's something interesting to look into.
Mhm. Oh, so on the other side of tourism, I've been a couple of times, and each time it's just, it's a city I've fallen head over heels in love with, and yeah, a huge influence was this film. But all you see in terms of like on every little souvenir stand, you'll either see La Dolce Vita or Roman holiday merch. So like postcards, or you'll like see some of, can you see? You can't see. But I have postcards from different scenes, and some of them are like deleted scenes from the film. I'm like, ooh, that's not in it. I have a postcard of Gregory Peck and Audrey Hepburn making out in the apartment. I'm like, I bet you that was cut out because she's underage and he's alone in her apartment. It might have been too scandalous. This is all my own speculation, but it's funny that they
Interesting.
sell deleted scenes
Hmm.
on the market.
So they've embraced that it was filmed there, kind of like
Oh
Philly
yeah,
has embraced Rocky.
yes. I don't know firsthand how Italians feel about the film, but it seems like it's filmed in a positive light. There's nothing negative about Italy of why they wouldn't
If anything,
embrace
it's a
it, you
love
know?
affair of the.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, it's a love story of falling in love with Italy. Like
With
the
Rome, yeah.
people, yeah, with the people and the culture, and she says multiple times how lovely it is and how
Mm-hmm.
wonderful it is to be there. So I mean, it made me re-fall in love with Rome. So I want to go.
It's and yeah, I mean, it adds an element. Loving this film for me just added that extra magical element to Rome, and it's forever one of my favorite cities, and I want to go as often as I can. Um, Something that, historically speaking, really caught my eye when I first watched this film, and reading into it a little bit more, I learned about why William Wyler chose Audrey Hepburn. Um, so nobody involved in the film was the first choice. Frank Capra was supposed to direct it. Cary Grant was supposed to be Joe Bradley, and Elizabeth Taylor was looked at as Princess Anne.
Mm.
Frank Capra basically sold the script back because I read he didn't want to be involved closely to anybody closely linked to communism, and gave it back. Cary
Oh.
Grant didn't want to be. I've read some conflicting things. I first read that Cary Grant just didn't want to give up the billing. He wanted to be the star of this, but I also read that he considered himself too old for the role. So this was obviously after they decided on Audrey Hepburn being um, Princess Anne. So she basically got the role because she nailed her screen test, and they're like, "Oh yeah, never mind, we don't want Elizabeth Taylor." She was basically the antithesis of the popular actresses of the time. She's thin, she's basically flat chested, not hourglass or voluptuous or that type of sexuality that was really popular at the time. So
Mm-hmm.
she represent they I mean, I think it was an awesome risk that they took in starring this film with this unknown person who has like such a different body type of the time, which now the pixie, the twiggy body type got really popular after that, but I can't off the top of my head think of anybody that with her body type.
It's
um
actually that brings up a really good point of just the fluctuating idea of the perfect woman over the
mm-hmm.
decades, because Audrey Hepburn and Claudette Colbert are very similar physically. They
Oh, so
both have those cute, innocent faces. They are
mm-hmm.
both pretty flat chested. They're both very like lean and
Mm-hmm.
elegant, that elegant style. But then, you know, like Elizabeth Taylor is opposite, and Marilyn Monroe is this like
Mm-hmm.
sex symbol, enduring sex symbol of culture. And she's nothing like them, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Like it's that'd be something interesting to look at, is when it shifted and
Yeah,
where it
yeah,
shifted, because it's bounced around, you know. And then
yeah.
even today we're changing the ideas of body image, and I've noticed in films we're moving farther and farther away from that like stick supermodel,
Mm-hmm.
and it's much more, you know, realistic women. And today's, you know,
Right.
actually everyday woman, you can actually see yourself on screen, which is the point. So that's an interesting thing that I'd want to look more into, so thank you for
Right.
bringing that up.
So I just found that like such an interesting fact that that was part of, like, it was a very conscious decision why they picked her, is because she had this completely opposite body type from what was popular at the time in terms of sexuality. And
So are you
I
saying that they didn't want her to be like a sex symbol? They wanted her to be more innocent and
and I mean, it wasn't worded that way, but there was just that it factor that she had. So the it on her screen test, the it factor, just it kind of, they overlooked the fact that she didn't have the
yeah.
assets that normally would
I
attract
see.
a
Yeah, I
star.
can't buy Elizabeth Taylor as much as she was, you know, stunningly gorgeous and a fabulous actress. She doesn't have that like innocence about her. Like she is very fiery and passionate, whereas Audrey Hepburn is much more pulled back and refined in a sense,
I don't
childlike.
I don't know how old Elizabeth Taylor was in 1953, so I don't know if this was still her like teenage years.
Maybe I'm gonna look it up.
So that might have something to do with it, where she was like kind of budding, but not the Elizabeth Taylor that we're also familiar with, like that image of her. But I mean,
Um,
I love that
Elizabeth
this was
Taylor was born in 32. And what year was this film?
53.
So she was 20. She was 21. She's actually younger
Mm,
than Audrey Hepburn. Interesting.
yeah.
So Audrey Hepburn
So
was 24.
yeah, so I mean, it's just as we talk out loud about this, it's just interesting points to kind of also revisit and research on the side, just for, you know, for fun's sake. It's good to be
For
informed.
funsies.
For fun, see, I was trying to avoid it, but then
No, I love that word. I'm down for funsies. See, on this podcast, we are combining classic and modern and putting them together.
um yeah, so oh, one last thing before we wrap up. One of my favorite scenes from this film is the mouth of truth scene. And
Mm.
something I learned was that was actually a prank that was played on Audrey Hepburn. Nobody told her that Gregory Peck was going to do that. And so what we see on the screen was 100% genuine. And watching that scene with that knowledge just makes it that much more lovable, because it's so genuine and pure. It's such a pure scene, and it's
Mm-hmm.
one of my favorites. Um, but yeah, with that, I would say, I mean, I have a very biased opinion about this film, but Heather, what are your final thoughts on this film?
Oh no, I highly recommend this film. This is a great one. Like, and almost if you're, I honestly it could be a toss up of which film. If you're like a classic film, is generally I recommend It Happened One Night
Mm-hmm.
as a good, like, this is your first classic film. I know you know, our first episode we talked about how It's a Wonderful Life is a great intro,
Mm-hmm.
and honestly I'm going to add Roman Holiday to my list of this could be a great classic starter film, because it's such a charming fun movie that it's okay if you're not used to black and white or used to the format. I think you still enjoy this movie, because I think
I
that's the
love it.
drawback of people with, you know, classic movies. It's boring and it's slow and it's in black and white. And
Mm-hmm.
like, this movie's not any of those things, except the black and white is just gorgeous. Like we said, the color would have been distracting.
Absolutely. I absolutely
Un-
agree. And just to wrap it up, for both films, I just think they don't follow that typical formula that has sort of saturated some of the modern films, and I just think they're refreshing enough. Or I agree. I think both should be watched,
Yeah,
especially
these are
if you're
two
new.
feel-good films.
Yes,
Like like if you just need a night at home with something calm and
not
feel
heavy.
good,
Yeah.
yeah, these are two great movies to watch. Okay, so next episode, in light of everything that's going on in the world and in our country, and the Black Lives Matter movement, um, Vasthi and I were looking at our lists of films that we recommend, and there's two films that we both had on our list that we both love, but we really want to discuss them in the context of the film, but also in how it still relates to today, because
Yes.
this is an issue that has endured through all of American history, and we can look back and see how much has not changed. That's where I am with this. And
Essentially, yeah. So we're gonna revisit 12 Angry Men and To Kill a Mockingbird. So if you want to watch those along with us, or just wait to see what we think of on them in terms of the modern context, check us out next episode. So be sure to check us out on moviemenupodcast.com. Follow us on social media: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Until next time.
stay classy.